The everyday prayer in Psalm 6 is a prayer for God to rescue in the middle of our grief over our sin. Let's see if any of this sounds familiar. Lord, do not rebuke me in your anger. Do not discipline me in your wrath. You ever felt the anger of God just feel like it's upon you because of your sin? I know that I have. Be gracious to me, Lord, for I am weak. Heal me, Lord, for my bones are shaking, and my whole being is shaken with terror. You ever feel like that you're shaking so much? It has to be that your very bones are shaking, and all of this because of your sin. I know I've experienced that in a very real way. Turn, Lord, rescue me. Save me because of your faithful love. For there's no remembrance of you in death. Who can thank you in Sheol? I am weary from my groaning. With my tears I dampen my pillow and drench my bed every night. My eyes are swollen from grief. They grow old because of all my enemies. You ever cried yourself to sleep? You ever have a damp pillow because of the tears that you have cried over your sin? Well, maybe for me it wasn't a damp pillow, but I have cried tears of grief over my sin. And look, I know maybe you're saying, okay, you're just saying that. You're supposed to say that. I have. I have experienced real, live grief over my sin. And felt everything that David has felt as he describes what this feels like through a prayer. But see, that the story doesn't end there. He says, the Lord has heard my plea for help. The Lord accepts my prayer. This is the good news, that God hears us even in the grief of our sin, even in the time that he should be turning his back on us. He hears us. See, Jesus says it this way: blessed are those who mourn because they will be comforted. The whole context of this mourning is that we are mourning over our sin, and that we will be comforted in the time of our mourning over our sin, the grief of our sin, that we will feel and experience this comforting. Because why? God rescues us in the middle of the grief over our sin. See, this is the gospel. This is the good news. David was looking forward to Jesus, and we are looking backward to Jesus, but it is all the same. The good news was always the same, that God hears us when we grieve over our sin, and God rescues us from our grief and from our sin. See, the very first Christians described it this way in Acts, that they said that there are times of refreshing that will come upon us, that will wave upon us when we repent, when we grieve over our sin. Not only have I experienced what it feels like to grieve over my sin, but I have also felt what it is like to experience those times of refreshment when God rescues me from my sin. And I invite you today to find what it feels like to not only feel grief over our sin, but also find what it feels like to have God rescue you from your sin.